In today's episode, Laura Eisenhower, great-granddaughter of President Dwight D. Eisenhower, shares with us her insights as to what is going on in the world today from an astrological perspective. Join us as we talk about false light, societal conditioning, levels of consciousness, and living from a place of authenticity within yourself. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health podcast as we come closer to the end of our series on science, mysticism, and beyond, humanity's next phase of evolution. I think after this episode, we've got, just 2 episodes left, and then we are finished this 15-part series. So if there's any of these episodes that you haven't heard back, please go back and check them out. We've got series on lots of different things too that you can check out at the inspirehealthpodcast.com website. On YouTube, we're holding a lot of the live events, as well as when we have the roundtable discussions. So those aren't going to be on the podcast particularly, but they will be on the YouTube channel. So just check that out at Dr. Jason Loken, ND, and you can watch some of those if you would like to hear more. So what we're doing now is every time we do an episode, we're trying to bring the guests back within a week to have a live. And then if we're doing a series, we're trying to create a couple of different panels where we can bring a bunch of the guests back at the same time and have kind of a roundtable discussion around what's going on. So those have been really fun and they've been really well received. So if you want to see that, go check those things out on the YouTube channel. And the other thing that's a fun announcement is that Tay and we've been asked for a while as far as how to create a bigger sense of community. So one of the things that we found was that whenever we did retreats, and Tay and I would run retreats on health and wellness and meditation and mindfulness and really on making shifts in our life and really how to live a really fulfilling, joyous life and what goes into actually making that happen. And a lot of it is really getting out of your routine so you can actually bring in new information and actually make some of the changes in the habitual patterns that we go through day in and day out throughout our life. So what we found is that a lot of times after people would come for a week and get a lot of real major insights and start to make some big changes in their life, that they would go back, and often within the weeks, we would usually hear back that a lot of the patterns were starting to come back. Once they kind of got back into their life, they were having a hard time integrating some of the strategies and they were kind of getting back into the same ruts again. And so we hear that and we understand that. And so what we were trying to figure out was how do we create a community where we can provide that type of support? Because I know for Tay and myself, that's essential. I mean, fortunately, we have each other to bounce a lot of the stuff off with, but we also are reading and listening to lots of different speakers all the time, because where we're keeping our focus really helps us stay kind of in a certain mindset, in a certain state of consciousness. So what we ended up creating was a Patreon community, and I'll put the link down below. And what we're going to be doing with that is essentially it's going to be creating a community. So it's a very low monthly cost in order to join, in order to basically be a part of these lectures that we're going to do and interactive experiences, question and answers, so that we can field a lot of the questions and start to help people on a broader base. And then from that, depending on what kind of level of support you need, you can move into different tier systems where you can even have one-on-one sort of coaching sessions with us as well for very specific things. But check that out, because that's something that we've been wanting to do for a while, and I think it's going to be a really wonderful place to create a community. One of the things that we are wanting to do with that community as well is create what Lynn McTaggart has called these Power of 8 circles as well, where we can really create this focused intent within our community where we can really help people start to actualize their full potential. And Lynn McTaggart's episode comes out next week, and we talk about that because it's incredibly powerful. She's the one that's done the intention experiment and all sorts of different things. She's brilliant, wrote The Field like 20 years ago. One of the leaders in this new movement of consciousness. So we want to incorporate some of those types of strategies within our community so that we are all supporting one another in fulfilling our dreams, whether that be better health or better relationship or just more joyous life. There's so many things that we can do, and having a really powerful connected community is at one of the absolute hubs of it. As Lynn McTaggart says, she thinks that's the secret sauce in manifestation, is having this specific group pulled together, and altruism kind of playing out within everybody. So stay tuned for that. We'll send more information out about that as we release it. And just check out the Patreon community link in the show notes here, and then you can go and learn more about that and see some of the intro videos, and we've got one of the videos that's for free there. So just check that out and let us know what you think. And now we're going to go right into the episode with Laura Eisenhower. So stay tuned. I think this episode goes on for about an hour and a half or so. So lots of different pieces of information we get into. I mean, we talk about everything around levels of consciousness, what it means to live from a place of authenticity, and then let that be your action, or as Huna Flash often says, is light in action. So what does that mean? How do we actually be that? So stay tuned and enjoy the episode, and let us know what you think. All right, everybody, take care, and I'll talk to you soon.
Welcome to the Inspire Health Podcast. Your life is about to get a whole lot better. Have you ever felt like you tried everything and yet still couldn't find the answers or the solutions that you were seeking? Whether you're dealing with chronic illness, physical or emotional pain, I want you to know that your body is the most sophisticated machine on planet Earth. Your body holds unfathomable wisdom. Trust in it and learn from it. Know that there are answers and there are solutions to your specific health challenges. And we will be uncovering all of them here on the Inspire Health Podcast. I'm so excited to be a part of your healing journey. Your transformation starts now.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health Podcast as we continue on with our series on science, mysticism, and beyond, humanity's next phase of evolution. Today, we are excited to have Laura Eisenhower. Laura is a global alchemist, researcher, and medical and intuitive astrologist. She's an internationally acclaimed speaker who has presented her work worldwide. Laura is the great-granddaughter of President Dwight D. Eisenhower, and she reveals exopolitical information about his administration that has been largely held in secrecy. She is considered by many to be one of North America's leading researchers on health, exopolitics, alchemy, metaphysics, and galactic history. Laura works to free us from the 3D holographic time loop, false archonic systems, and military-industrial complex, and exposes hidden agendas so we can take our power back. Feeling a calling regarding her mission since she was a child, she has gained incredible insight through her wilderness adventures, psychic development, and has been connecting major dots about how to guide us into the higher earth energies. Her passion is to inspire unity consciousness and bring us back to the 0-point unified field, the totality of our divine powers. Laura, what a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Good to be here.
So we're excited to chat with you about some things. Now, for some of our viewers that are just not familiar with, say, medical and intuitive astrology, I'm wondering if you can kind of break down a little bit first just what that work is and how you started to get into that. It sounds like you were connected pretty early on to what your mission was. So I'd love to hear sort of how that all took place.
Oh, yeah. Well, I just ended up learning it with more of a curiosity. I wasn't really learning it to do readings per se or make it such a huge part of my life, but it ended up becoming such a huge part of my life because it really, connected dots to the other research I've been doing about galactic history. So looking at a chart and knowing things like the Saturn moon matrix and some of these, things that relate to secret space programs and just how the planetary grid network has been, targeted and somewhat manipulated. It's like, wow, well, it's really interesting because you can see some of that, or you can pretty much see all of it when you look at charts. Of course, when you look at a chart, you're going to look at individual charts, but then there's the ability to look at, charts for a particular part of the world and how astrology relates to the planetary grid network, stargates, our own physiology, and endocrine system, our organs, our energetic body, and pretty much everything about us. It's like, wow. So if this is a map helping us to see patterning, both benevolent or kind of like flowy, kind of harmonious aspects, and then difficult ones that represent challenges, this can unlock a whole lot and help with healing of the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, sort of energies, because we're dealing with earth, air, fire, water, because every single zodiac sign is ruled by a particular element. And so our DNA also is elemental. The nucleic acids in our DNA actually hold a connection with earth, air, fire, water. And now with ether, which connects to mitochondrial DNA and the fifth element and the 13th sign that came into play in 2010, it just became even more fascinating. I'm like, the 13th sign, oh my gosh, now this all even makes more sense. So in my presentations, I correlate medical, astrology and our DNA and unlocking the mysteries of our junk DNA and what shows up in a person's chart that kind of prevents them from unlocking those dormant codes or, so I like to use it as a just mechanism or modality to help people to unlock their dormant DNA. And the outer planets like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are the great activators. And so what we see in our society and with the reversal kind of energies and sort of the deep state kind of dark agendas is they know and have an understanding of astrology. So when there's a big event that might help to upgrade, humanity based on the transits and different alignments, they usually like to create an event to sabotage it. So as far as the medical part of it, I got really interested in it because I've always avoided, I don't know, like pharmaceuticals and just more into the self-healing, even though I know that they have their place. And I've had that a little bit in my life, but just wanting to like not stay there. I just got a huge fascination with, the medical part of it all. So for example, Aries rules the brain, the cerebral hemispheres, the cranium, the eyes, the face, the upper jaw. So if you have an aspect or a predominance of Aries energies and it forms a challenging aspect to say like Libra, which is kidneys, adrenals, skin, ovary, and I've always before, what is it called? Pancreas and just the sugar balance in our body. So if you have a challenging aspect between the two, and then you see what house it falls in, it might be in the house of, the mother or the fourth house, the way you were raised, your relationship with your mother. And if there's a challenging aspect that maybe connects with the seventh house, it might show a constant patterning with reliving certain dynamics in relationships that kind of keep one bound to a negative patterning, right? And so if it's not addressed or processed, it becomes a physical symptom and can then lead to disease. So I've helped a lot of people. I hope I've helped a lot of people, but I brought a lot of attention to this and I've gotten good feedback, but I've, helped people find clarity with their physical symptoms through learning this side of astrology.
I think all of that's really fascinating. And my world's more integrative medicine and naturopathic medicine and stuff. And most of the time, we often find like there's always layers before things get into the physical body and start to create troubles. So, and I think when you incorporate things like Chinese medicine stuff, you start to see that it's actually more the norm to integrate the body with a lot of other stuff rather than just looking at it purely physically. So I think all that's really fascinating. You said a couple of things really interesting that I'd love to chat a little bit more about. You talked about unlocking the dormant codes in the DNA, and that's come up several times from different people that we've talked about in different ways. So we recently talked to Dr. Todd Ovokatis, who is the founder of Pineal Tones, and he does a lot of work with like Lee Carroll and Cryon and whatnot. And he talked very similar in some ways around these codes, and part of what he was doing with the pineal tones was sort of creating certain acoustics that literally were dissolving some of these barriers to them. And then sort of, I love the term junk DNA. It's kind of like, of course, the body's going to have a whole bunch of junk DNA for, the body doesn't work quite like that. But when you're talking about it from that perspective, from medical astrology, how does that work? Is it bringing sort of the light of the information and the awareness to people that starts to unlock it? Or how does the unlocking of the DNA start to take place through the work that you do?
Well, it has a lot to do with just the initiatory planets, the things that really activate us. So the outer planets, which are generational and they move real slow, like Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune. So those are the main three. With Neptune, you've got, what Neptune represents is connection to the multidimensional cosmos, It connects us with the unseen realms. It connects us with the creative imagination. So musicians tend to have a predominance of Neptune because they can kind of reach into those dimensions and kind of bring in the inspiration from, the angelic realms, like a great harp player, a piano player, or any instrument really. So that's Neptune. And so that activates us in a certain way. It's not as activating as Pluto and Uranus. Uranus is much more the great activator. But Neptune, if it's got distortions or if it's got challenging aspects, it can haunt us. It can keep us like in delusions. And it's the planet that also connects us with self-undoing, with addiction, with just feeling really lost and confused in this world. Because if we shut off our dream capability, when we focus on a vision or a goal, and seek to achieve, to manifest it, if we lose connection with that inspiration, it can really contaminate. I don't like that's not the right word, but it can really trouble our connection with our creative imagination, because our imagination ends up getting haunted or limited, and belief systems begin to come in, and all of a sudden we're not accessing our greater potential anymore. And that's kind of what we see in the world with some of the fear that gets stirred up. People kind of lose themselves to that, and it can infect one's creative channels, and they end up manifesting something they don't want because they choose to really overly give it power and believe too much in it. So Neptune is, kind of like that. Uranus is the planet of shock and upheaval that leads to great awakening. It's electrical energy. So the Uranus and Pluto to me is like the electromagnetic spectrum. Pluto's magnetic, Uranus is electric, connects with the masculine and feminine. So Uranus is like the upgrader. It's going to upgrade our DNA, but it gives us the shock and upheavals that we sometimes misunderstand on an ego level or on a mental level. And sometimes it's just like, oh, that's terrible. That's a misfortune. This just got ripped away from me, or I lost this job, or I went through this terrible breakup, or I had this injury or accident. And so the perception can limit a person from being able to upgrade their DNA because they're not going through the initiation. They're instead choosing a mindset that absolutely, kind of sabotages it. And those that embrace it are often the people that are, like, that accident actually woke me up. That was the best thing that ever happened to me. Or I'm so glad that, in hindsight, that breakup happened because I'm so much happier now and I found my true love. But when we're going through it, Uranus is not comfortable. It also connects with our authenticity, our truth frequency, and our higher mind. So it sort of like requires us to sort of surrender and trust when these sort of events happen. But sometimes it's not coming from Uranus, and that's why astrology can be helpful. But I don't think a person really needs to understand astrology. I don't think it's like crucial to have in a person's life, because these things are going to happen anyway. But it's helpful as far as like, oh, okay, just unlocking the mysteries of this weird world we're in. The last one is Pluto. Pluto's the planet of death, rebirth, alchemy, transformation. When it's afflicted, it really impacts the reproductive organs. It impacts our kundalini. It's very much about just stripping away the things that don't serve us so that we can be in the core of our power, like our true power, our divine power, our soul essence. And so all these things, if we have access to the creative imagination and it's not loaded up with fearful belief systems or traumas that keep us in a loop that causes maybe addictive tendencies or self-destructive behaviors, and if we can embrace the changes that come out of left field and trust that it's taking us somewhere greater, and if we can go through the dark night of the soul and not misunderstand it for like, depression, like that'll never ever be healed, or just like the world is a miserable place. And no, it's the dark night of the soul. It's not going to be fun. So if we can breathe through that and initiate through it, Pluto is the planet of alchemy and transformation. And so if we can embrace these outer planets, then we can begin to unlock these dormant strands of DNA. When you look at most people's charts, there's a bit of resistance to these outer planets, or something that just kind of makes it difficult to fully embrace. And there's a lot of people, though, that do have a really strong connection, but they tend to feel out of place in this world. And so then you'll see ego wounds where it's like, I'm misunderstood, nobody understands like these downloads that are coming in. And so they might be fine with being able to go through those initiations, but they might feel very troubled on a personality level, and maybe feel a sense of isolation or loneliness. So those are always available to us. And the mystery that I love about junk DNA is that it's a love story. Like these strands, when they kind of come together and the fire codes that have been scrambled, kind of harmonize, and, it's about frequency, so it's the building of the hierogamic union within ourselves. So you got level 1, which is, the 6 7D kind of connection, and then crystal lotus heart, which is the 8 and 9D chakra energy, which also corresponds with the strands of our DNA. And then you've got the 10, 11, 12, and that represents the Christos hydroplasmic light and the hierogamic union. So when we look at like, how are we going to upgrade our DNA? We have to look at it in terms of a love story, so we don't lose ourselves in the terminologies or, maybe the science of it all. So that simplifies it for me. It's like, we need to break up with the imposters and the harmful things in our life, whether it's food, whether it's people, whether it's a job we have, whether it's a belief system we hold, and really embrace this greater, truer love story. And we see that take place in our lives when we might have had a few relationships, didn't really work out, and then boom, there's the true love. So that's kind of an outer reflection of that journey. And so, so it's the integration of polarity and the healing of all that through dropping the distortions, the programmings, the ancestral patterns, and all the different things that have made it very difficult to have harmonious sacred union relationships, and how society and culture has kind of made it, very difficult to honor that priority, and that's why there's so much divorce, and that's why there's so much crap, whatever. Sorry. That's actually not a bad word, right?
I think pretty good. We're pretty open on here. So.
Yeah. So right. Yeah. Well, I won't drop F-bombs, I promise. And I do that sometimes. So it's really just, when we look at the inner work, what is the inner work? We're looking to cultivate our relationship within ourselves. So when we do that and we begin to raise our vibration and we find harmony with the right and left brain, and, we actually impact the planetary grid network. We are a replica of the planetary grid network, which is also based in the same things that our DNA is, as far as, and our chakra system, as from what I've learned. I don't have it like all correct, but it's just been so fascinating because, when you have those moments of, okay, that makes sense, because sometimes it's easy to get lost in some of, the information, but yeah, it is a love story. So I've done presentations that are called, the greater love story of creation, and that we're all participating in the reunion of, the most divine, sort of couple, like the Christ Sophia. And that's a divine template that exists within us, that makes us healthy, that helps us to connect with that 0-point unified field and that ether energy, which can purify our chakras and begin to heal even genetic damage in our DNA. And that's where we start to really experience, these, higher planes of, reality. And it's pretty awesome. And so the ether energy is available now. The sun started to move through the 13th sign in 2010, and that is ruled by the ether. It's connected to the mitochondrial DNA, which obviously, as people know, connects with our mother. So on a bigger picture level, as a collective, that part of us has been very damaged because there have been reversal codes and things that have made the ether very inaccessible. So it's caused a lot of unwellness and, it's been a lot of dark history. Now that energy is back. And so as it gets amped up, these dark agendas and this other stuff that we know about is doing everything it can to kind of distract us away, because some people don't want to lose their power over us, because we make them money, we make them rich. And of course I could go into deeper layers that get disturbing, but I think you pretty much don't want to overly answer this question. So.
Laura, when I think I know a question I think you're going to want to answer in one sec here, but just back to the ether there, you said ether is related to mitochondria. And
that's what my research has shown, and that's what absolutely resonates with my intuition. But anything I share,
Well, I just find it interesting because it's like that's been a big area of like a big field of study over probably the last decade, has been how much mitochondrial dysfunction there has been, right? And so I know even working with patients, that's often an area that needs to eventually be addressed at some point, is the degree of mitochondrial dysfunction that's gone on. So I'm just wondering how that, when that element then starts to come back in, because you said, do you say now ether's back? Like we're now that.
Yeah. It's sort of a simple way to kind of, describe it. It's like something's opened up, and our ability to integrate like light codes and really like get transmissions from Mother Earth, from the core sort of planetary like core sun within the Earth, and like it really represents sort of the mother energy really getting anchored back into the physical planet. So that helps us to heal our mitochondrial DNA. As you know, of course, mitochondrial DNA within our own physical body connects with our biological mother. And so on a more collective level, the kind of bigger picture of mitochondrial DNA is sort of expressed through the 13th gate and the core sun energy within the planet. And so I've studied the galactic history of, okay, well, how is that so there's major galactic history. And man, do I geek out and just like totally think too much. But anyway, learning the galactic history of how this planetary body was formed, how we dropped into this lower density, how the mother arc energy began to participate with this creation by bringing her consciousness fully into the planetary core, that ended up getting, really targeted. That's why, we hear about like the exile of the divine feminine and all the mythologies of her going into the underworld or being abducted into the underworld and all these different things, that kind of has shaped nature, even like with seasons and, some of the plants and animals and just the whole concept of the planetary consciousness. So because of all the wars, like electrical wars, Nephilim wars, Lemurian Holocaust, Atlantean cataclysms, Egyptian Sumerian wars and all these different things, that energy was not able to be anchored in the planet anymore. And that's where we start to see things like satanic ritual abuse. And I hate to, bring light to it, but that's kind of the deal. And like the Baphomet energy and all these things that are more about like sorcery and black magic and manipulation of DNA, manipulation of humans, to the point where humans are born and they're like, oh, well, this is what it means to be human, when really we've got this hidden treasure of, 12 strand and beyond potential. And that is represented also in the zodiac being, 12 houses. Now the 13th is here. That connects us with the ether. And that energy of the ether helps us to purify the elements that have gotten so contaminated and damaged over the course of thousands of years. So in both DNA and RNA, the mitochondrial DNA serves as the fifth principal element of cosmic ether. And it being sourced only from the mother, it's our return and reconnection with the mother energy that's really, really going to help us to get through these times and recover from these sort of assaults. And that energy of the ether, which has been so unavailable, people are so not used to, that it's very difficult for them to embrace it. They'll either say, oh, that's woo-woo and astrology's woo, and it's just like people avoid the amazing things that are available to us right now, not in like any other place, but nature itself and our connection with spirit and cosmos. And like I said, Neptune, our multidimensional awareness. And when we begin to really unlock that, we actually participate in healing galactic wars and dealing, it has a direct effect on everything. So I feel when we do the inner work and we really allow that energy to purify us and clear us up, and that the earth responds to us, and we have much more of a relationship with nature and this ascension period. I don't even like to use that word anymore, than we can imagine, but I like to now use just, human advancement, just, accessing and embodying the fullness of all that we are. To me, that is the definition that works. I've been, trying to call on a mothership, just like, okay, something, but I'm trying to stay, I'm not like losing faith or hope. I never have. But it's very difficult because people are on the verge of really having a great awakening. And it's kind of troubling that, this jab, this, I would learn so much from you. I'd love to interview you sometime and ask you a bunch of questions, but I'll kind of leave it at that about the ether. But yeah, so as far as like the nucleic acids in our DNA, when that one becomes accessible, that to me is the Great Purifier. And I don't think the word miracles really describes it, but the kind of things that are unexplainable begin to happen when we connect with that. And, the best way to kind of do it is to, embrace this nurturing love of the mother. The thing is, because it wasn't accessible for so many thousands of years, people are, it's like, if you're ripped away from your mother as a child and you had to be raised without that nurturing love, humans carry that kind of trauma because for so many incarnations and lifetimes, we haven't really been able to connect with it in an authentic way. It's been through maybe religion or certain figures and archetypes or figurines, and it's nothing as close to what it means to awaken it within the self and really, really experience it in the beauty of, nature, and to, kind of, I don't know. Now, it needs to just be an experience.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting too, what I've noticed, Laura, is even around ourselves, we've noticed that it's right now, it's a lot of the mothers, like the mama bears, stepping up and fearlessly speaking out and intuitively knowing that what we're being spoon-fed to believe is actually deceitful and manipulative and just simply untrue. But I've seen to a much larger degree. I know you spoke with Sasha Stone not too long ago, as well as Kathy O'Brien. That was a brilliant talk, by the way. I love that episode. But you know, there's definitely the men that are speaking up, but I'm seeing to a much larger extent around me anyway, and the people that I've been connecting with, it's a lot of females stepping up, which is exhilarating.
It is. It really is. I feel like I've more female friends than I'm just like, this is just unreal. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's like we've all found each other, and men too. Like, just, it's like, I really feel that we're in that higher earth energy vibration amongst each other. And even though we're witnessing this craziness and madness on the, on the 3D kind of earth level, which is just a programming really, because this is not a 3D earth. This is a multidimensional earth. This earth is just filled with the most glorious things. And, but yeah, no, the women energy, the female energy in men, just, it's like, what's awesome is, and there's no real stereotypes here. And, and some people feel totally androgynous, and I have no issue with people that relate to being transgender, but there is like an agenda, I feel, that is indoctrinating our kids. And that to me is disturbing. Everybody just needs to find themselves without too much intrusion. The more we can support people finding themselves without kind of giving them, but anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, the men are really, dealing with sort of like, okay, what does this mean for me now? Women are getting empowered, and we've been trained or kind of conditioned to be like the protector or the authority. And I mean, there's a patriarchal, program that we all carry to some degree. And like, even for women, they might not feel very empowered, or they have to answer to somebody, or, they should be so lucky that so-and-so is going to take care of them. And it's very disempowering. And so just to see different people and what they're working on, even though, I kind of avoid stereotypes, but obviously men have gone to war, gotten their limbs blown off. That's really traumatic and disturbing. And that's why I really can't stand like trashing of men, or like, oh, the women are in power now. I really just see, and I know that's not what you're referring to. I'm really seeing like more harmony, more unity. It's easier to be like friends with men, and it's easier for them to just kind of like be like, wow, I'm really starting to understand, the feminine, and the feminine is just starting to also like get on fire, and not necessarily feel like she has to be a man to keep up with the world. Like, having to prove herself in a man's world. It's deeper than that. It's that warrior spirit that refuses to be controlled, subjugated, downtrodden, taken advantage of, used and abused. And that can show up in all sorts of forms. And yeah, I mean, having a competitive nature, there's no big deal with that, but I just feel like so much depth in certain people that I've been meeting lately. And it's so refreshing, because it was just like, well, I think everybody thought high school was a nightmare. So it's just like, where are my people? Like,
yeah, I can definitely relate for sure. I think with the feminine energy, I think what has really amplified for me personally is that nurturing, caring, compassionate quality has, this is not even like I'm trying to intellectualize it now, because I'm trying to articulate it in a way that I could speak about it. But I know really early on, when this thing broke out, it wasn't even a choice to stay quiet. It wasn't even an option to not say anything. It was like an intense of an urge, similar to the one, that hit me when I was giving birth to my children. It was with that level of intensity that, no, get out, do what you can, share the truth that that you are connecting with to the degree that you need to, in order to inform. And that's what I mean by the feminine nature. And as far as the masculine energy coming through, like when Jason speaks, now that the muzzle is off, he'll speak more about that. But when Sasha Stone speaks, like there's this protective quality, this warrior-like protective quality that is really endearing and reassuring. And, all of us benefit from it. Everyone benefits from it.
Oh yeah. And just what you're saying, just, yeah, with not having a choice. It's like, it's the instincts of a mom, you know? And so like the mama bear thing, or, you know, sometimes I kind of see it like the eagle protecting the eggs, and it's like any predator, anybody that's going to come and mess with it is just like, you know, well, we try and gently defend them. I mean, I know an eagle is going to be a little bit more aggressive, but I try and like not respond to anything in too much of a negative way. But it is that instinct. It's instinctual. It's not just like, oh yeah, you know, it'd be nice to just get a channel and just expose the stuff that I've researched. It's like, I have no choice. Personally, it feels like life or death. Mm-hmm. It's like literally my body begins to shut down on me. It's like, and then when it's like, okay, what are you trying to tell me here? It's like, write this, do this. And it's not like telling me what to write, but it's saying, just be yourself, say what you need to say and just do it. And it saved my life. I mean, and yeah, the mission, you know, got really activated when I was young, and I've just kind of been talking about it. And I won most out of touch with reality for the senior class, because nobody, like, they were like, what is she talking about? But it's like, I'm not going to shut up. And I do feel it comes from that mother archetype, the divine mother archetype, just being in surrender to it. Like, just, you know, just use me, like, you know what I mean? Just kind of like, and not even asking, it sort of takes over, but I'm not like saying, oh, I'm such a divine mother, but it's like, there is no choice. It's like too much is at stake. It's like the heart investment is no different than the relationship of mother and child, maybe a little bit different, you know, because it's so much bigger and it's so personal to have a child. But I feel the same kind of instincts for the planet that I do for my kids. I mean, obviously my kids, I'm gonna, you know, they're my number one as far as putting them, you know, first. But like, it's all part of this much, much bigger picture anyway. So it's not like putting them first means the rest like falls away, but I totally agree. I'm sorry if I'm like completely rambling and like, but on your point, it is like completely coming from that return of this mother energy. And it's not like it wasn't there before, but it was almost like inaccessible, almost like a longing, a soul longing that you just can't grab because something is constantly trying to rip you away from it. And your choice in the matter doesn't really matter, right? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people, of course, have incarnated in these dark cycles of history for a long time, and some are coming in and haven't really been here much. And they're just like, whoa, I know I've been incarnating here a while, and it's just, anyway. But yes, I love what you just said about the mother instinct with the speaking. It's just like, it's like nobody's going to mess with my child or my children or this earth. But you know, it's not like personalized in an ego way. It's surrender to this universal energy that we all have access to. And when we align with it and we step up to the plate, there's nothing, you know, that can ultimately take us down or steer us into new world order. So that's the hope. To me, that's, you know, part of the awakening. And also the masculine, just the integration of both and that celebration of true, you know, sacred union. And realizing in our own personal lives, we need to take responsibility to that and nurture our personal relationships, our relationship with our children, our relationship with our friends and family, to emanate those qualities and not compromise or settle for less. And it doesn't mean abandonment if it's not up to par. It just means, come on, everybody, let's get on board and let's do this. And let's all agree to heal this and do all that we can, because there is an unconditional love factor when, you know, people have enough integrity and can admit, look, I'm wounded, I'm traumatized, I'm doing my best, I'm sorry, I'm messing up, which is a lot better than somebody acting out with the narcissistic personality traits where they're impossible, you know, and it's just like, you have to get away from them. Mm-hmm. So.
It makes me think too, like when we've listened to some of the work with Jacqueline Hobbs, who's Oracle Girl, and I like some of the stuff that she does a lot. And she talks a lot about just really, it's like coming back to nature. It's coming back to a natural way to interact from a place of that deep authenticity and then just reacting in a natural way. And it's almost like, I feel like for the vast majority of us, there's been so many conditioning set in place and all sorts of stuff that people have become so kind of almost disconnected to what is the actual, just the innate natural way that we are supposed to interact when different things happen. You know, like I remember one episode she talked about, and she was talking about our almost need to be nice, you know, and sort of this thing. And she's like, because what's happening to you is not nice. So it's kind of like,
Right.
you
I know.
shouldn't be nice when that it's almost like these conditions that we're supposed to behave, act in a certain appropriate way, and we've got very disconnected to what innately we should feel like. I remember
This has been played big time here in Canada too, because it's like, you're Canadian, you
Yeah.
always play nice.
yeah, but it's like I remember Desmond Tutu talking once about, if you ever see a child being abused, you should get very angry. That's an appropriate natural response because it's to make something come up to create some volition. And so when you're talking about the mother energy, and it's not that not to take away from male energy, ultimately it's like it's the union of the two of them, which is what balance. That's the yin and yang. But I feel like what I've seen in clinic is some of the most the most powerful people I've seen have been when, it was usually when when the child got injured, and it could have been from a medical intervention of some sort. And then it was almost like everything inside them prior to that intervention actually did not feel good about it. They felt like they didn't want that specific intervention, but then they were kind of almost logically and convinced to go into a certain intervention. And then they did it, and then the child got injured. And then after that, that mother has gotten so connected back to what that natural instinct should be. Because I feel like what happened is particularly because I think particularly moms and their kids have such a powerful connection. And it's pretty powerful when that starts to get disconnected, how that can even take place, but when you start to look at all the different things that have been set up to create some to get moms to even second guess what they're, when I see a patient, they come in and the mom tells me something, I'm absolutely all ears. What do you think is going on? You tell me, because I actually very much think that you are the most connected to that child than there is. So if you think something's going on, then I'm not going to just assume that nothing's going on or they're going to grow out of it. It's like something's not right. You vibrationally pick that up. But that's been very, in some ways, I think very intentionally kind of disconnected. But I feel like that's that connection is starting to come back again. And that's the part when it does, that's where I feel like there's sort of that strong no. I know, I trust my own instincts on this because and then I think that's actually really, that ripples out like a big wave to a lot of other people when you start to see and feel that.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And as people are getting closer to that, they're coming up with really weird ways to just create more disconnect, but it's really falling on more deaf ears than ever before because it's getting absurd. When you hear about there's an article and I think Hannity even posted it. And this isn't just some joke newspaper that I saw it on, but it said, there was a recommendation that breastfeeding is bad for this or that reason. It's just oh my goodness. So, I have faith in the human spirit and just that people will just be okay, this is getting so absurd. It already is absurd. It's been absurd, but now it's getting absolutely ridiculous. And that's why I love the memes, with the Dr. Seuss. It's seriously, you're banning Dr. Seuss. And no, maybe there's a deeper reason. Maybe Dr. Seuss was involved. I don't know, but there is cancel culture and there is censorship and there is this attempt to really, separate people, but it's really, really difficult for them to pull it off. Because of the times that we're in, because of what you just said about natural instincts. And that is the most important thing. When we fall into fear, I feel like it's just a temporary thing. It's we're maybe, needing to just exercise a little bit of discernment and caution. But then when we get to the next level, we can begin to access our greater intuition and our instincts and know what to do. Our higher awareness knows exactly what to do. I feel just like you're saying. But this outer noise of, this is how it has to be. This is what you have to do. This is why you're like the ultimate kind of doctor, because you empower the person to get closer to themselves. And we don't have a society that functions on that at all. It's absolutely the opposite. But I do agree that people, are getting closer and closer. My background is wilderness expedition leadership. And I really loved having that experience because it's just you learn to develop that muscle. You have no choice because because when we were 30 below, it's even my body, it's like sometimes just going to the bathroom like was enough to, I mean, like some things can kill you and some things can save you, but then you can kind of like put the two together a little bit. And I don't know, you know what I mean? So, and that's the most important thing, is that just people, you know, stay bold. And there's so many incredible truth tellers out there. And I'm glad I was able to kind of raise my kids and just be able to kind of do it on my own terms, even though I kind of had to play mom and dad role. But there's nothing more beautiful than our true organic nature and what we are truly made of, who we really are, and what we're capable of achieving. And when we really begin to access our greater abilities, this matrix of like money and status and all the things that they've addicted us to, and I wouldn't necessarily like choose that word. I know I keep saying that. Oh, it's not the best word, because the English language is kind of screwy, I think. But it's like, here's your supplemental step parent. That's the matrix. We're going to addict you to wanting this, needing this, and this is how we're going to shape what it means to have confidence. You know, you got your failures over here, you got your losers, you got those that have been ostracized, you know, and we still see that with certain things, and they're really trying to kind of amp that kind of thing up. And when we step away from that and we really can develop our self-worth based on, you know, just the naturalness of it all, I mean, we're going to unlock so many amazing things. And it's just crazy, you know, that web. Like, even when I was younger, I used to see it like literally like a spider web, that people are being coiled into these things that this parasitic force just wants to like eat away at. But the thing that's getting rolled up in it all might feel like the most powerful, the most, well, you know, and then all of a sudden it's just like, wow, okay, they're not really functioning very well anymore. And an example of that is, you know, 60% drop in ratings of the Golden Globes. People are really abandoning Hollywood and that whole like, oh, it's all over here. And just like the whole fantasy of, you know, the castle and the prince and the queen and the princess, and, you know, the ideology of, you know, celebrity has absolutely crumbled. And I feel like that is really bringing people home to exactly what you just said, because people have literally lived life through these characters and not have lived a real life. Not, you know, some people have, they go on adventures, or, you know, they I mean, there's plenty of people that do, but there's not that encouragement to be adventurous and to completely, you know, connect in that kind of way. And that culture, I feel, is dying, even though they're trying to push more enslaved narratives, enslaving, inducing sort of narratives, if you know what I mean. And it's just, yeah, it's falling away. And on a personal level, it's like our negative ego collapsing, our over-identification with ego is collapsing, kind of in a similar fashion. And when the negative ego construct or any sort of imbalance in ego collapses, it doesn't mean ego has to disappear. It just becomes an energy center for our higher awareness and our higher self to generate creativity through, with, you know, integrity and higher principles included, so that we actually can make beautiful things happen instead of keep answering to a system that is very destructive to relationships, children's self-esteem, and their mental and emotional development. And my gosh, spiritual principles aren't in the mix. It's either you're over here in this church, or, I mean, not to say that there aren't, you know, spiritual people, but I live to see the day that the school system actually really helps these beautiful children be all that they could possibly be. And we're going to have to, as a humanity and as people in our communities, demand that and make it happen ourselves, because there's nobody else that's really going to do it.
Yeah, we've come to that conclusion ourselves too.
That's exactly what we're starting to look into too.
Yeah, it was actually 4 years ago when I had an idea. I'm like, we need to actually create these community schools where we actually get together with like-minded individuals within our community and gather our children together, figure out what's important for us to share with our children and how we ultimately want to nurture and support them. Because I knew that, you know, my son, who's 16, putting him through the school system, when I put him, I had to take him out of Waldorf because at the time I was splitting up with my husband at the time, and I couldn't afford to keep him in Waldorf. So after 3 years, I had to pull him out and put him into the regular school system. And it was painful, like the stuff that he was bringing home with him. And it just felt disconnected. Like it just felt like this is not what I want him to be occupying his mind and time with. But yeah, after that experience, I said to Jay, there's no way we're going to homeschool our 3 and 4 year olds. So that's
there's
the
no
track
way.
that
So
we're
we're
on.
going to homeschool her. Yeah.
Oh, that's so awesome. I mean, my kids, yeah, they were exposed to public school as well. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's kind of exciting too, because as soon as we even started to kind of open, it's almost like I picture these like pods. So we've been actually trying to set it up where we are now, that we can actually create an environment here where we could then start to look at bringing different kids and kind of run something like that. So it's kind of exciting though, because when you actually even start to think about it, you know, then the wheels start turning, and then all of a sudden you start to connect with people that are thinking along the same lines. Like, you know, you have to first just put it out there as a possibility and nurture it a little bit. And then it's amazing always to me how
The opportunities
things just
to come
start
up.
showing up. You meet different people. You randomly run into someone down at the beach who's actually, you know, a teacher and taking kids out on the beach to kind of do their lesson there or something, you know. So you start to run into these different people, and you can see where the pieces start to fit together. So
Oh, totally. And I can't help but just say that the way energy runs in the false kind of matrix is not based in like synchronicities or just you know, amazing kind of soul connections where, you know, people just, you know, kind of find each other, and it's like that's a different dimensional level of energy, and that's way more true to who we really are. Obviously, I mean, it is true to who we are, and this kind of matrix inversions is more like these really low energy tactics on a mental level to get people to do things that are really against the best interests of everybody involved. But people are complying all the time. You know, it could be fear tactics. It could be just targeting one's self-esteem. It could be the fear of what other people think. It could be the fear of abandonment or loss of, you know, friends and family. And this is the biggest growth period that we're going through right now, is being okay with that. And we're all going through it on some level. You know, whether it comes to our kids or just, you know, what we're willing to do and not do. And it's just amazing to see that everybody has a choice right now to really determine, like, who are you and what do you stand for? And what are you willing to compromise? And what are you willing to be inspired by enough to actually manifest and create, because you are actually believing in yourself and trusting yourself and something, you know, much greater, because, you know, the energy of the planetary consciousness and of course, you know, source energy, and however anybody like interprets God, really does have our back. and that natural energy of all of that we're connected with is always seeking to heal us, upgrade us, and it's encoded in nature. The mind control makes it so hard for people that literally they stay looping in such destructive ways without realizing it. And to me, that's like the root of most disease, really, because I feel like when we get injured, nature's encoded to immediately create a healing response. When the body's out of balance, it immediately wants to create equilibrium. And of course, you as a doctor, and if you wouldn't mind me interviewing you guys someday, because I would love to just, because I mean, what an amazing like knowledge base to have with this level of openness and awareness. I can't even imagine what comes through you and how much you help people.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, working with patients humbles you if you allow it to humble you too, right? When you work with people over years and you start to realize, I mean, ultimately my belief is that, you know, we all have this immense healing capacity, innate healing capacity. We have this immense capacity for intuition. We've got our own inner physician. And when that's running smooth, I think everything runs pretty well. And for the most part, more of our job is to maybe assist in trying to find where the things are that are getting in the way from that running in its natural way. And then from that, once we kind of clear the cobwebs out a little bit and people connect back, and then they are back in charge of their own health anyways. And that's ultimately when it runs. And those things are all physical, mental, emotional, vital body, right up to the spiritual level. So you got to kind of look at all of it, because and it's also a top down, right? It's the more abstract that actually affects the concrete. So, as much as we're taught to stay right here, conventional medicine really looks at down here, but it's like, that's the last step. I mean, there's all these different pieces that you have to kind of look at. And that's really where I think most of the deep healing happens for people anyways, is in the, because you're connecting the dots yourself on things. And I think it ultimately helps to bring people back to that real core authenticity of who they are. And, to get there, you can't get there without running into a lot of the roadblocks that have been set up, and, and how we think, how we feel, all of these different things, much of what you had just finished talking about. So.
Yeah. And the relationships, that we have that are a part of that unwellness, whether it's like sticking with a person that's not right for us, whether it's just hanging on to a job or fearing not having a paycheck, being afraid of going into those kind of like poverty consciousness instead of like, whoa, I'm a free spirit, I'm an abundant being. And, eventually we're going to just manifest things out of thin air, I would think. Yogis know how to do that. And, so I remember, and it sounds almost redundant hearing myself say this story again, but when I shifted my perspective, when I lived on the road from feeling lack, feeling kind of anxiety about where I'm going to get the next meal, to a moderate degree, part of that wasn't a problem. But when it really started to get to me, I'm like, nothing good is coming from this attitude that I have. And then I would just reflect back on the wilderness stuff. And it's just like, you can't journey through the wilderness fearing the poisonous snakes, fearing the hike, fearing that you will be dehydrated. You're in the moment and you just know what to do, and something just happens and it kind of shows up because you're not overthinking it. You're in the moment, you're in the now. Even if there's, a loose plan, but you're in the now enough to be resourceful because your brain isn't occupying itself with the anxiety. It's actually occupying itself with intuition, higher awareness, and all that kind of stuff. So when I shifted that perspective, when I was on the road and I was kind of going into that dark zone and darker forces were sort of finding me like, oh, she's a good candidate to mess with because she's very vulnerable. I was like, whoa. And then I just, boom, remembered that from what I learned and shifted my perspective. And I literally, I would pull money out of the ground. I would meet like the coolest people and it would be like opportunities were just showing up. And I was like, that was just a shift in perspective. That it was that easy. Seriously. I was amazed. And I'm like, are we literally that one thought form away from turning this whole thing around? And that's where, each of us has to step up and change that, one patterning that is getting in the way of like such goodness and beauty that is available, I feel.
Well, And when you were even talking about, I love the analogy back when you were doing all of the wilderness stuff, because to me, it's like, I agree, like you're in your element when you're doing that. You're back in the actual element and you're reconnecting yourself. And, from my understanding of nature, it's like, you can't be in nature without receiving certain codes that are waking part of you up anyways. So, but when you come back out of it, and this is what I think is kind of going on now, it's like, when you look at stuff from a point of view of like levels of consciousness, right? There's so many things that are set up, to keep this cycle going where people stay so much in feelings of either fear or shame, which is a big one now, shame, which is an incredibly low level of consciousness, guilt, all of these different things that were, in many ways we're taught, and you almost can't even, because, parents get taught, grandparents get taught, they just keep passing around the same stuff. And, and I would say even like fear, shame, and guilt are probably some of the biggest ones going on right now. But if you look at from a level of consciousness, they're way down here, right? They're really low. And when you get stuck in those, you've got very little capacity to actually influence and make change in your world or the world around you. So you literally do start to get stuck. And so when you can do something like, like what you're talking about, you can take people out and then reconnect with nature, connect with that essence of who you really are, get above that threshold where now you're starting to get into, feelings of like willingness and courage, and you're starting to move up the sort of consciousness ladder. Now you actually start to be able to influence and make big changes in your life, right? And so I feel like right now there's so much stuff taking place. And to me, whenever I see anything and it comes across right away as trying to make me feel almost a bit like guilty for not doing something, or shameful for not doing something, or that I should be fear-based around something, right away it's a red flag. Just goes, I don't even want to read it. It's sort of like, I don't even want to look at it. That's coming from somewhere down here, and it shouldn't. And in many ways, the entire healthcare system is set up around that. It's basically looking for disease rather than looking for the true potential that each individual has. And that's where we should be moving when it comes to quote unquote medicine, is we should be moving to uncovering what true potential we all have as individuals, rather than trying to look at what our markers can we find for disease, because from that mindset,
brilliant.
You're going to keep finding it.
Oh, totally. And also, yeah. And just to sort of add to that, and which I know, I mean, is what you're saying. It's those markers, even when you see the greater potential, those markers that you see for disease are actually like messengers that the body's trying to tell the person something so that they can maybe release a trauma or process, internalized emotion or creative passion that they're afraid of putting out there, and a lot of it, of course, stems from childhood and a lot of unconscious things that we don't remember. I mean, if you had a parent that yelled at you all the time or told you to shut up or didn't support your, musical interests, man, that's not going to necessarily lead to a healthy adult if they don't just say, all right, not necessarily screw you, but like, I'm going to do it anyway. As soon as I turned 17, 18, my husband took off when he was 12. So he was just, but anyway, you know what I mean? It's just like, to me, like disease can be a gateway towards our awakening when we can embrace these symptoms. And that's what I love about what you said, because, it activates a person to be able to begin to move that other stuff out, because it offers inspiration instead of, oh, I'm just going to carry around this label and this disease name with its prognosis and its, man, I just wish there were more doctors like you out there.
Well, and like you said, it's like, and it's all really on the mindset that you're even looking at markers. You can look at certain things. Like I'll still look at certain markers, but it's kind of with the excitement of where are we going to take it. Where are you, so that we can actually move to here. So we kind of know where you are and where we're going to, as opposed to, oh God, this is going on and there's a lot of trouble and you're going to be in a lot of trouble if you don't get this down. It's sort of like just in the wording of it, when we recognize this sort of entanglement that is taking place between everybody, how the caregiver, whoever that is, whether it's a counselor or a doctor or your osteopath or whatever, they, that entanglement, the mindset that everybody is in, sets the stage for where ultimately people are going to go. But
well, it's everything. I mean, everybody could study from the same book, but it comes down to the practitioner and the person and the type of person. It's similar to, having that teacher that changed your life, and that teacher that, kind of gave you a stigma or a complex because they just embarrassed you in front of everybody. It's like, it really comes down to, the goodness of the person and the qualities of a person with whatever skill that they have. Because to me, that's the most healing thing. If you're around a kind soul that like is empowering and is really in it for the right reasons, to me, that alone offers a huge portion of that healing.
Totally.
Then, yeah, because I mean, I remember like if I liked one of my teachers, it wouldn't be like, oh, I need your approval, but I was much more inspired to get a good grade. I mean, that was after I really messed up my grades in high school, when I later was able to choose the courses I was in. And I remember taking microbiology, and I'd read some of the like 7 a.m. in the morning, 6 a.m. studying, and it'd be like graphic pictures of like and I'm like, oh man. And then it would be like, oh, if you did this or engaged with that, or, you went to this country and did that, then this is the disease and this is the symptoms. And I literally remember reading it. And this one time when it said, and then, you might develop a twitch. I literally developed a twitch, and I'm like, so I went to my science teacher, and I'm like, I don't think anybody's really sick. I think there's a lot of other stuff going on here. And, but, and then, one looks at like bioweapons or, some of this, kind of like weaponry or assault, and not everybody necessarily believes that exists, but it seems like, energy signatures and recoding of things that change the brain waves of the individual, that changes, like you said, the abstract before it goes into concrete, that it literally targets something before it becomes physical, because it's an energetic distortion. It's sort of like music with a lot of subliminals in comparison to like something at like 432 hertz or 428. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting predicament we're in right now, because even though there's really not that big of a threat that we're led to believe right now, with a virus with a recovery rate of over 99%, just hearing 99.9, just repetitively hearing the threats, if you're buying into that and you're creating this state of fear within your body, like it would be, it must be an inner war that's taking place within those people, right? Who are really buying this narrative that is being played out on mainstream media right now.
I know. Oh, yeah. And it's like, there's no doubt, people, are getting, sick, but from what I've understood from astrology, and I don't consider myself some great astrologer. I mean, I understand the language and I've utilized it a lot in my life, but we've had the Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto conjunction. And so we're in a major transformational cycle right now as a humanity, and it's a big paradigm shift. And literally they're stunting the growth of this greater initiation, like I was bringing up with the outer planets, particularly Pluto, dark night of the soul. And then there's rebirth, transformation, alchemy, the phoenix rising, and all that kind of stuff that's available to us. They're literally stunting the growth of humans. And the North Node's in the sign of Gemini. The North Node represents our greater destiny, what we need to integrate and step into. So if it's a transiting thing, it means it's affecting all of us. So Gemini has to do with the throat. It has to do with truth or speaking anything. But like, what is the quality of those words? So if we're moving or hopefully moving into like a 5D thing, what is that really? So I like to kind of break it down. It's like fifth chakra. Okay. That has to do with speaking. North Node's in the sign of Gemini. Okay. The fifth house in astrology is Leo, which is very creative and all about kind of skills and talents. And it's very free spirited in the sense that it's just going to be like, hey, I love playing, music, or I want to dance, or, and then you've got, the fifth element, the ether, the mitochondrial DNA thing. So all these things are coming together for people to begin to speak truth that holds a frequency that actually can activate. So, as we know, like sound healing and different things can help us, to heal, and it has a good effect on us. So isn't it funny that in this time where it's all about, all right, the frequency of truth, this whole idea of moving into like a 5D thing, and it's beyond that, it's like the full shebang. The masking and the censorship and the taking down of, all these people's expertise that, really care. Is that really going to work? Their tactics? No, because as long as we don't allow it to overly influence us and cause us to forget the larger picture, we're fine. But really what it's about is that our words that are powerful, that's why, spelling, words, magic, with good intent, connected to integrity, connected to compassion, our words can literally turn all this around. And if we could literally shut down the media and all the stuff that's screwing with people, we'd be fine. So yeah, I mean, people are like so close to just being able to like manifest such a beautiful reality, because our words, to me, 5D is realizing that the power of our words are powerful enough to create an alchemical shift. They're powerful enough to dismantle dark technologies. They're powerful enough to even bless food that might have chemicals and toxicity in it. You know, to me, there's something really powerful about that. And I feel like in the higher dimensions, or the 5D sort of higher earth energies, we were more in touch with that. The frequency of truth was coming through our voices instead of spreading mind viruses, because we're reiterating stuff that we saw on the news or learned in school that might have missed out on giving us a much fuller picture. And to me, that is part of unlocking, you know, the greater DNA, is to be very careful and responsible to our thoughts, our words, because we can, I mean, some people can be wounded for life because of something that was said to them wrong, and somebody could experience some miraculous healing because of something right that was said. And I know you're that kind of doctor, and that's beyond just having medical skills, and both of you have that kind of energy. So I am so freaking grateful to talk to you guys right now.
Well, I love all that stuff. And, you know, and even if anybody doesn't totally get how that works, you know, like how can you sort of say certain things and create healing? I mean, well, first it's like you said, you know, how certain words can hold people in a certain pattern for almost their entire life if it was negative. And again, they cannot unlock the potential for somebody when they have. And outside of that, you know, we were interviewing Huna Flash, he goes by. And he's actually, I want to talk to you about this in a sec too, but around stargates. And he's actually going to different stargates on the planet. And he's kind of working on activating those and sort of raising the frequency and allowing more light to come in. But he was talking about how incredibly important language is, and that language does absolutely unlock the DNA.
The codes.
And so, and then, you know, you talk to people like, or you look at the work. I mean, tomorrow we talk to Lynn McTaggart and we're interviewing her. And I mean, she's run the whole intention experiment. So it's like, I mean, she's done this for decades. She was one of the first people that really brought up a lot of the stuff around the field and how this stuff is all interconnected. And it's like, we need to start to move to thinking, and it's not like you stop thinking about biochemistry and everything, but it's like you need to start to move towards thinking about frequency, vibration, energy, light, intention. It's like, that's where really it breaks down to. When you break things into smaller and smaller components, eventually, I think those are the roots to almost everything. So everything that we do carries those signatures. So when we can start to be dialed in from that authentic place and that truthful place, and then we have the courage to kind of speak from those places and act from that place, you just become a living conduit to creating change around the world, you know?
Totally. And we're just these amazing creative vessels. We are so gifted to be in these physical vessels that have so much, you know, potential that we don't even realize. And yeah, it's a kind of slow process, because we can't really go from, oh, I woke up in the morning and now I'm a Merkaba UFO and I'm piloting my Merkaba body through my consciousness. It's going to take a little while, and we're dealing with, you know, a lot of heavy density around us. But I mean, this is the most exciting news, when we can, you know, align with that and refuse anything that tries to rip us away from it, and pull together a lot more to stand together as a force in the world to not allow this tyranny and this evil to persist. And like you were saying, it's like masking kids, separating kids, you know, the bright lights and just, you know, different things that they do, and what they do subliminally through music and movies, is absolutely having a very subliminal and unconscious, like, negative impact, I feel. And when we can just kind of clean that up or have boundaries to it, man, things feel so good. But the hard part is when you get too, like, I don't know how much of this you do in your field, but the whole energy of addiction and like PTSD and the nervous system, and making that transition from maybe a substance to a more healthy lifestyle. I know that runs in my family, and I've dealt with that a lot in my life. It's just sort of like, not always easy, but once you get there, it's like, there's nothing better. It's like you look back and you're like, what was I thinking? Like smoking cigarettes, like drinking too much, like what? Where's the purpose in that? But at the same time, I do like to bless things with a medicinal quality if I'm going to engage with it. But, you know, but then, do you know what I mean? Do you guys deal in, like, I mean, because I think that's the hardest thing, is people learning to trust each other and people being accountable enough with themselves to be trustworthy. And I think that is a huge dilemma for people, and why, it's kind of hard, for certain individuals. I'm not talking about like those that are socially engineered and controlled by the matrix kind of stuff, but those that are really struggling with just feeling safe and okay. It's just kind of like, you want to surrender, you want to be in this higher, deeper, more profound kind of energetic, but ancestral patterns, past traumas, or, little red flags that come up that it's like, is that just me messing with myself, or is that something to be concerned about? And that's a lot of fun. It's really fun being human, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure. And you know what, too, like what we've noticed within our own individual lives, and since we've been together, like we typically hold, when we're not in lockdown, like workshops and retreats. And what we found is just the impact of a community setting, just having support. And because within that community setting, once you start to create a feeling of safety, like true feeling of safety, then people will start to feel secure enough to be able to start sharing. And when that sharing comes about, it's a miraculous thing, because you realize you're not alone. Like you come out of the feeling of alienation and, it's just me that's totally messed up and screwed up, or it's just my family, it's just my crazy thoughts. But then as soon as that feeling of safety is set and the vulnerability starts to come out, you just realize your commonality as a human being with every human being.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just the betrayal. Sometimes I think people have felt that they've had that, and then all of a sudden it's like, what the hell happened? But they weren't really connected enough with their intuition to be able to let go enough. They might have had a codependency, or I'm giving my power away, or you're my guru, or you're my this, and maybe that's why it didn't work out. But I just see a lot of wounded people that really felt safe or trusting, and I know you're talking about something absolutely different, of course. And sorry, you were going to say something.
No, I totally get what you mean too, though, and it's a tricky one, and and even sometimes in that process, it's like sometimes that's, you go back to what do you kind of sign up for to kind of come through here, and it's like sometimes those are just part of the processes that you go through, and if you can look at them from sort of the perspective once you've gone through them, is like, okay, what happened, and you can kind of take a good honest look at what went on and what you were thinking, and then I think we keep kind of chiseling down into what truth really is. A question I've been asking a lot of guests is, how do you discern truth from falsehood? Because I feel like that's where we are right now in a big place, is like there's such polarization and there's so much information, and how does one really discern truth from falsehood? And to me, the only way I feel, and this is a constant process for us as well. I mean, we're not kind of there, but it's like the process is, in my mind still, it's like, it's the constant kind of removing of what's not really you,
Yes,
and
totally.
the more that keeps coming up, the more you naturally just start to get closer and closer to what that is. And then my experience is that as you keep doing it, you then start to really get dialed in very clearly with what is truthful. And that doesn't always have to be exactly the same for everybody else. But I do kind of feel like there probably is a higher, truth, like a bigger picture truth. And then we've kind of got our individual truths. But I think the more that those two things kind of connect up, then I don't think we question it quite so much. And
yes,
but it's the process of dissolving a lot of those things that are not us. That's the programming and the conditioning and all these different things. And to me, I think of it no different than, it's like if you're trying to get back to healthy, and aside from looking at it from this perspective, it's like, oh, you got to clean out, you got to, change your diet, you got to clean out all of the built up of all the garbage that's been in your body forever, because it's just kind of putting blocks in what's normally supposed to run well. But I think we've got the same types of blocks from just conditioning and patterns. And I mean, these are like lifetimes, right? And they've been there for a long time. And you kind of sometimes have to hit those hard ones too, because I feel like that also then shines a big light if you're open to allowing it to shine a light on then what needed to be healed. And then maybe you don't have to go through it quite the same way.
I love that. I mean, and this is, kind of my perspective. I bless adversity. I am so grateful for all the hardships and all the adversity I've ever gone through. it has given me more than I could ever imagine. I appreciate it so much. And I know that's me teaching myself things that maybe I wouldn't otherwise maybe pay as much attention to. And I just feel we're here on this earth for spiritual and soul development. And the ultimate goal is to be sovereign beings, you know, connected to God's source in the way that it works for us, in a way that makes us feel healthy and good inside, in a way that our physiology responds to in a positive way. You know, it's like, oh, my body's actually healthy because what I'm connecting to, and how maybe one sees it. It's like, you know, it doesn't have to be a belief system. It can just be an embodied experience. It's like, we're not all going to see things the same way, but we can support each other being true to who we are and harmonize that. And it's going to be so much easier to harmonize it if we can all support each other, you know, having that kind of connection with ourselves. And I like to use the term like spiritual athlete, like, you know, are you going to hit your head against the obstacle or the barrier and just be victimized by it? Or are you just going to learn how to fly over it? You know, I love these challenges. I really do honor them. And I just feel, you know, I can understand the victim mentality. I think sometimes people need to kind of own that a little bit. Like, okay, you've been victimized, you've been hurt, you've been harmed, you know, let's not just scratch it off, like, get over it. You know, that doesn't work. I know that. But you know, it's just like fear. It's like, that's just the beginning of something opening up to something much greater. So, you know, it's like, keep breathing through it.
Yeah. And like Taya was saying earlier, like when we were doing retreats and stuff, and you'd see some real transformation happen. It makes me think it's like the first part of any of that stuff is to create a field first, right? It's like we often think things happen kind of A plus B plus C equals D. And it's like however we see it play out. But prior to all of that taking place, there's a field that's being created. And depending on what that field is ultimately what is going to show you how things are going to play out. So if there's a field that's creating a space that's genuinely caring and open and non-judgmental and all of these types of things, then there's going to be a space for people to actually connect to that and to really heal. I think, like, you know, of the infinite possibilities, you will start to connect to ones that align with that field, right? As opposed to if you're in a different field, then there's less likelihood you're going to connect to something like that.
Right. Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, when we see just like how ecosystems run, I mean, just the beauty of nature. I mean, I know it's, you know, pretty brutal sometimes, like, oh, nature. And it's like, oh, the lion just completely annihilated or, you know, it's like animals are destroying and eating other animals, and other ones are just like, you know, happily eating the leaves. And then, you know, it's like, okay, where's my mind going with this? I feel like it's an outer expression of what we go through on an inward level. Things die all the time. Things get devoured. Our digestive juices like break down the food that we eat, and it eats it, like it destroys it, changes it into a different form. And to me, like, nature is an outer expression of like what we truly hold in our soul essence. And nature's totally fine with the way it's set up. I mean, unaltered ecosystems basically give us life, and they support one another. You don't see a squirrel sitting around being like, I really wish I was a dolphin. It's like humans think too much. We think too much. And then we move into this artificial persona just to appease like this ego need to be loved by somebody that might have insulted something about us. I mean, it's like, seriously, the animal world is so pure in that way, even though it's got, you know, like sort of just, I don't know, I wouldn't call it disturbing, but it's like, you know, when you see the little bunny rabbit and then all of a sudden it's just like, and the bunny rabbit's like, get me out of here. It's like, oh, the poor bunny. But bunny's okay with it, I think. I mean, you know. But
it is funny though, because it's like, and I get it. I mean, like I said, we've got a 3 and a 4-year-old, and my 4-year-old right now is like, she's like so into nature books right now. So it's like, and most of the time she wants to like look at books about sharks or about the big cats, and she's big into like dolphins and whales, but she's really interested in, and none of that actually really, I find none of it really disturbs her at all. Like, she's actually pretty comfortable.
It disturbed me, but it doesn't seem to disturb her.
But
you're right.
This is what I mean though. Sometimes it's like, you wonder how much of that is just because of the movies we've seen, the story, like all of that stuff. Whereas if you just kind of strip it right to its basics, you know, I think about it from the, like, say, the immune system. I mean, the immune system is pretty harsh and pretty relentless on things. It's like, you know, it's designed, if it sees something, it goes and kills it, you know, devours it and breaks it up. And then we use the parts again for something else. Like, so, you know, when we think of kind of like how we're really designed, and when it's very much in line with nature, right?
Yeah. And the whole idea of like composting, and it's just like, you know, if something dies, it becomes nutrient.
Right.
Then new things grow out of it. And, you know, I tend to not really want to watch movies anymore for reasons I don't need to get into. But just this one show about children recalling their past lives, and also a show about people that have died for up to 20, 30, 40 minutes. And it's the most peaceful, incredible thing. And you know, these people aren't actors. They're not, you know, it's based on a true story. And I look up some of the names. I'm like, are you sure this is for real? It's like, I know it's for real. And that's the beauty of the multidimensional. This might be, you know, and I love when you said abstract and concrete, you know, this might feel very concrete down here, but when it really comes down to it, it's like the much larger picture has no issue with death, has no issue with some of this stuff. It's a part of the natural flow of things. And it's amazing to me that they've really been able to capture the minds of people to cause nothing but fear, where literally people live their whole life, you know, fearing it. And that we have funerals, we're literally crying and mourning that these people have transitioned into something beautiful. How about we celebrate their life and just be like, right on, and tap me on the shoulder and, you know, like haunt me a little, like in a nice way. And if you're a stuck soul, ask me for help, and we'll all like do our best to help you to transition. It's like there's such a block to, you know, the unseen realms. It's amazing to me that, but I feel like we're going to break through very soon. And I mean, you know, it's an individual thing, obviously, and people like us, you know, have broken through. I feel like I've lived my whole life pretty much broken through, but I'm amazed at how many times I'm just like, I feel like horribly, not horribly, like I'm mean, but like way too human. I'm like, you're losing it, Laura. You're literally letting all this get to you so bad. What the heck's going on? And it's very hard sometimes for me to take the greatest healing approach, but I'm just not needing to be a therapy session. And I know we've, you know, talked for a while, and I could talk to you guys forever, and I want to respect your time, but yeah, I mean, but I embrace that too. It's like, you know, I love myself for it in some sort of weird, twisted way. It's like, you know what, you know, yeah, maybe it's unenlightened that, like, you know, I'm getting like super pissed about this or that. But like you said, there's healthy responses to witnessing certain things that are absolutely unacceptable. And when I see what the deep state and, you know, child trafficking rings and this and that, I'm sorry, it's unacceptable. And yeah, you know, don't misunderstand my pissed offness or rage. And I'm not saying that to you guys, but just in general, for like being unenlightened. I don't care about enlightenment right now. I want to save or help, you know, as many people as possible right now. And it doesn't mean I'm just going to be like floating around on my, you know, and I never claim to be enlightened. We've all been enlightened before. We naturally are enlightened beneath all the humanness, I think. But, you know, at least people like, I feel like us, some of the layers are not inauthentic, and that we do really represent who we truly are. And that's what I love. That's my most favorite thing about being on this earth, is meeting people like you that, like, you just, every layer is aligned and authentic.
I think it's probably because we've been through so much shit ourselves. Like, really, like, it's been, you've been through, I feel like when this thing hit, I just had a crystal clear realization that every trauma, hurt, pain, challenge, and even perplexities that I wasn't even able to make sense of up to that moment that I had experienced in my lifetime, it was to prepare us for this moment here and now.
Mm-hmm.
No kidding.
Well, and like you were saying, Laura, it's, I kind of think, and we've been talking about this the last while too, but it's like, I really feel like spirituality in a lot of ways has been hijacked, because it is kind of this idea. And, you know, I said this to Dr. Northrup when I was talking to her, and I said, you know, where's the difference between sort of like acceptance and passivity? Because I feel like in a lot of places, we are kind of taught like rise above it, you know, like don't get kind of caught down here, rise above it. And I get that. And I get the power of being in states of things like gratitude and appreciation and unconditional lovingness. Like, but you have to genuinely be there, you know, and sometimes to genuinely be there doesn't mean you bypass some of these other things. You have to sometimes go through some of those things. And, you know, like what Christiane Northrup was saying is that, you know, righteous anger actually stimulates your immune system. Like it actually boosts it. It's supposed to go up.
None of that.
So it's kind of that thing. If that's going on, that's not a bad thing for your body. You just maybe have to be careful that doesn't turn into hatred and violence, but you
exactly. Oh my God. I've just written about this. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I've just been writing about this so much, but keep going. Yeah.
So I think kind of spirituality, I mean, and it's been changing for me a lot over this last year, just as far as how I interpret it. And I mean, I used to follow a lot of work of Dr. David Hawkins and was a student.
Oh yeah, Power versus Force?
Yeah, it's got like everything there. We used to go back and forth to Arizona and with him. And I love it. I think he's brilliant. And but I feel like, you know, like I was saying in one of the other interviews, but it's like, I remember when this fellow stepped up, because at that point I kind of had always just kind of pictured that, like, you know, enlightenment, and he was an enlightened person. Probably, you know, when I remember seeing him and shaking his hand and just like kind of breaking into tears, you know, you just can't, you're even thinking about it now, it gets me welled up. Aww. But I remember watching him and just thinking like, okay, and then enlightenment was just always being in this high sort of state of pure love. And, you know, I remember he would take questions, and I remember this person coming up once to ask him a question, and he was a full-on narcissist, right? And he was basically came up to ask a question about how he was with his wife and his child, but then he decided he wanted to be with this other girl. So he left them, totally just abandoned them. And then he was with this other girl, and he's kind of gotten that run its course. And now he feels like he should go back and wants to, and basically, and I saw Dr. Hawkins literally stand up and like there was righteous anger that came up in him. And I had never seen that before. Even right now, it gives me goosebumps. And it so dawned on me that's like, to be spiritual does not mean passive, right? And I feel like this is, in some ways, I feel like that's what happens. And I mean, not always, and I'm not putting that in a box around it, but to me, that was something that I needed to look at. I need to kind of make sure that I wasn't just trying to stay up here because I wasn't comfortable looking at this stuff. And so in that process has made me sort of own it in a different way, right? And to me, it comes back to being more authentic with what would my natural reaction want to be, without trying to be appropriate, trying to be nice, trying to be whatever, but what do I honestly feel would rise up in me in certain situations, and what do I actually truly resonate or not resonate with, and then kind of go from that place. And be open that maybe that changes, right? I think that's the other part, is not sort of being adhered to that, but maintaining in a state of openness that you're okay with your ideas of what you think is going on, or right or wrong, or all this stuff, but that's flexible and malleable depending on new insights, new resonance, new information, you know, all of that.
Which takes flexibility, right? You know, just to be able to kind of be like, maybe I do need to see something differently. I always, you know, really try and stay flexible. I just have to make a point, but I don't want to cut you off because I love what you're saying. And it's just like, oh my gosh. So, all right. Is it okay if I just?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So looking at the Hawkins scale, right? And the way that I was interpreting it is like, you know, we'd love to vibrate constantly at like enlightenment, love, and all this kind of stuff. But it's okay to visit these lower places. When we visit these lower places, we invite them to learn from these higher states. You know, like sometimes I see it like a lost child that we're tending to within ourselves, or, you know, it's just part of the process of, you know, even nature, when we were talking about, you know, the cycles of nature. But it's different, you know, with power versus force, you know, as far as frequency, shame, guilt, regret, and all this stuff is not comfortable places to be. But the ones that don't process in that way can be worrisome. It's like, wow, okay, it was okay that you just robbed that person or punched that person out, or, you know, traffic that child and you don't feel regret, remorse, or guilt. I mean, that's crazy that you don't experience, like you were saying, like, you know, the natural responses, you know, that are healthy. So I feel in certain places, those lower energies are appropriate, but they're guiding us back up the scale. But when it's detrimental is when there's a block and we're not able to get back up. And it might be something unconscious, like, you know, the behavior of a really angry person who just continues to project. No matter what you say to them, they're just not going to remove themselves from that vibration. But I feel like people that have reached those higher states don't always maintain it and need to experience, you know, not like in a self-induced kind of way, but it's just sort of like, to me, a natural function of humility and just like, okay, you know, maybe I'm having a life review. Maybe I am processing, you know, guilt and remorse and shame for not wording something correctly, or the time where I might have raised my voice at my kids or not been the best wife. But when they persist, I feel it's a breeding ground for disease. And so
absolutely. Yeah.
You know what I mean, though? It's like,
totally.
I'm not afraid of those lower states. I'm kind of sick of going there, but I realize they help me to get back up, because I'm like, all right, well, I'm glad, like, I'm self-reflective enough. Maybe I overdo it. But it's so interesting, that scale. Oh my gosh, it's so cool that you know him. Go ahead.
How he would talk about it is, it's like, if you are at a state of like, you know, unconditional love, right? Like he would say like 540, you'd kind of be right up there. It doesn't mean that you don't still, you know, basically if you're human, you're going to have an experience of all of the emotions, and they're appropriate at different times. But the essence of who you are tends to be there. So even if you get angry, the anger is still probably connected to the vibration of love in some capacity, right? Like no different than, I would say, like, you know, you come across a bear who has a mama bear who has their cubs, and the anger comes up. That's still coming from a vibration of, you know, that might not be the best example, but the idea would be that
makes total sense right now, especially
that if the essence of who you are is up there, which by and large would be a very small percentage of the population. Most people don't live in that field, but that's one that he would recommend that is probably the most attainable and actually does the most benefit on this planet, would be to strive towards moving to that sort of place. And when you were talking about people that had no shame or no regret, like almost like sociopaths, it's interesting too, because I think, you know, and they might say, no, I'm okay, I'm at a place of acceptance, or I'm this, but it's like, if you actually read what he means by those, they're not actually there. And this is where he would talk about the Luciferic energy. So he would say the Luciferic energy is in many cases, he would break down the difference between Luciferic energy and Satanic energy, because they're very real forces. And he would say that the Luciferic energy in many ways is actually the most destructive, because it's what flips truth and falsehood. So it changes it so that people start to perceive falsehood for being true. And then they start to live their life in a certain way, adhering to certain principles that they think are true, but it's actually been reversed.
Which is really interesting, because I feel like that's kind of amplified right now where we are as a society and what we're seeing.
That's my feeling too, is that we are living in this sort of almost like mirror kind of, you know, it's like what we think is true is false, and what people think is false is more true. And we're trying to, you know, ultimately perceive what the real truth is around all of it. And we're still kind of all working on that piece. But I feel like in a big picture, that's kind of what's gone on. And he goes to my head on a daily basis at times. So.
Oh, totally. I mean, I feel like it's in everybody's face to say, look, are you going to drop this false light BS? It's always been there. Now it's more obvious as far as, put the mask, you know. And so to me, like the inward thing that we're working out is where are we attached to the false light? Where do we rely on it to feel good? Where are we hooked into it? And sometimes, it takes a dark night of the soul to, in a sense, resurrect. So sort of the metaphor of, you know, the Christ story, I can't say or want to say like what I believe is the true story, or what religion has decided it is, but I do feel like the Templars, like the true Christ Templars and the Essenes, had real teachings connected with how to become Christed beings, and this whole sort of death resurrection is now like upon us. So when people are like, oh, there's a prophesied Christ coming, it's like, yeah, we got to find that ability to be Christed beings within ourselves, I feel. And then sure, maybe Christ will come in, but it might be blue beam technology. So we got to be careful. But, we collapse something in order to resurrect something. And yes, there is a death involved. And the Luciferian part of it, okay, because the Christ Sophia energy is connected to the planetary body Venus. Venus has been creating Venus transits and a sacred geometry in the cosmos or galaxy or whatever, that I feel is like the correcting all this stuff, because the inversion of the pentagram, which is earth, air, fire, water, ether, has been largely like, inverted as far as their symbolism. And the Venus transits actually formed a perfect pentagram in the sky. And I feel it created the correction that brought the mother energy back in. And because Lucifer is also connected with Venus, morning, evening star, you hear about that with Lucifer and Christ Sophia. I feel like the Christ Sophia is the true divine template. Lucifer is the negative ego construct, which brings out the false light. And for whatever reasons, rebellion, that's also a part of our greater experience of, oh, all right, we're in a free will universe. Let's play with power and see what it does. Do we want to dominate others, or do we want to be... so that is like an archetype that we all hold that we need to reconcile within ourselves, because I feel like we win the war within, and we have to reconcile these archetypes within ourselves. And if we do that, we can generate that into the collective, and we're not just going to be sitting here being like, and so that's what I love about Hawkins, because it is Hawkins, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's about frequency, and it's about also accountability to self and getting to know the self better. And that's why I also love tarot and astrology, because it's like, these are archetypes that we all carry. And we need to write better stories, and we need to be the empowered, like, myth carriers, and be like, all right, Hades, F off, and Lucifer, and rise in this greater awareness of the true union of the Christ Sophia template or Shiva Shakti, whatever. It doesn't, names don't matter. And it redeems Lucifer, because our negative ego or whatever we got addicted to as far as false light falls away. And it's up to each of us to overcome that battle within, I feel.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think ultimately all of it stems from our own it all starts from in the inner part of us. It always does, and it's always this intermix, it's like, as the inner world changes, then we see the changes in the outer world, and whatever we see in the outer world is a reflection back to the inner world. So it always keeps coming back to that. And then that's up to us to just, that's to me where it takes a certain amount of just courage and willingness are such good steps for anything to start to shift. It's like we have the courage to do something and the willingness to stay open to experience something else, or to make a different choice, or wherever we want to do. That's what opens the door for everything else to start to happen. So.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Yeah. That really kind of helped me, because, anytime we externalize something too much, it's kind of like, oh, we're at the mercy of the outer world. It's like, excuse me. We're co-creating this experience, and what are we choosing to be aligned with? It's like these challenges are really designed to help us to access the better part of ourselves, I feel. And society has taught us to be disempowered. And that's where the initiations have turned into digression instead of advancement.
Right now, where I think people are is, it feels to me like everything just keeps getting more and more, right? Like it's getting closer and closer up to our nose. So it's like, if you were able to somehow kind of make through with everything and not have to change too much and get by without having to sort of change your life too much, not look at it too much, I feel like we're getting to a point where it's not. So an example would be like, in parts of Canada right now, they're basically saying mandatory masks for all kids that are going to go to school. And so I was talking to a colleague of mine, he was like, that's in Quebec, and he's like, yeah, he goes, my kids are going to have to go back. And I said, well, this is kind of where we're at. So
So when this stuff happens, we're now, it's getting closer. You've kind of been able to get by long enough without it maybe having to, you can talk about it, you can kind of have a stance, but you haven't had to change stuff too much. Well, now it's at the point where it's like, you have to ask yourself, is that something that you're totally okay with, or is that something that doesn't resonate with you? And then how do you act in accordance with that authentic part of yourself? What does that mean? And that's where I think we're now having to start to make some of those choices. So I know for ourselves, it'd be like, no, kids come out, we homeschool them in. Like that's what it'd be. Yeah. Sort of for us, it would be a no-brainer on that. And I'm not making it right or wrong for people, because I really think that's something people have to make that decision themselves. But you need to be, if something is really not feeling good for you, there's a reason. Well, and I want people to check in on that and then explore it.
Yeah, we also know that the next step, as we've seen being rolled out in other countries, is then they're going to be, masks in schools, and then the next step is going to be jabs in schools. And there's
like you can't function.
Yeah, there's been newsletters put out already in schools in Ontario as well as in BC, Canada, where they're kind of setting that into place, where starting this month and into next month, they're going to start to roll out the jab. Sooner or later, we need to make a decision and put our children first and say, no, enough is enough.
I know.
Sure.
Right, like you were talking about earlier with like the mom. I mean, it's instinctual. It's like it's not even about choice. It is just a response to what needs to be responded to. So, I just really hope to help build, these, forces to address this everywhere in the world that it's happening.
The tricky part for a lot of people is that, if they don't see it up front and in the way that they feel like they need to see it for things to be real and true, then, so it's sort of like, hopefully stuff will start to come out more and more in all of those regards, so that what is actually true totally surfaces. And then I think that's where there'll be some really big awakening kind of going on and big shifts. But
yeah, because it just sounds like a scary movie. It's like, oh, that's not really real. I mean, I thought Epstein and the list of people flying on Lolita, airplane, and all the lawsuits, and the fact that he was put away, and so was Ghislaine Maxwell. You would sort of think that people would be like, wow, okay, there is something to this. There are victims speaking out. They are getting sued. He was put away. But sometimes just what I feel about Weinstein is they're sort of the sacrificial whatever, in order to, act like, oh, we're doing something about this and we're putting them away, but we'll do anything we possibly can to make sure that nobody links anybody else with it, even though there's flight logs. It's like, oh, well, they could be doctored, and, and just the same thing with, the possibility of election fraud. And, I'm not totally amped about, the T-man, but I am amped enough to know that he's different than what we've seen, because both sides are corrupt, and it's not about right or left. It's like, it's about freedom versus tyranny, obviously. So, I mean, but what are you guys going through? I mean, I keep up with things in Canada. I mean, I know you guys moved from Toronto, and now you're, and you said Vancouver?
Vancouver Island, yeah.
And I mean, does it feel like a sustainable place to stay? Because it's such beautiful territory, and I feel like these people are going to be overthrown so quick. I mean, do you feel like in the next year or two, it's all going to be better? Or when intuitively you kind of feel into it, where are you guys at? Especially as parents, it's going to be more lit up because you're like, oh my gosh,
Well, at least what we're seeing right now, and what it feels to me is it's like the bifurcation is getting bigger and bigger. So not even meaning the polarization of stuff, but literally people are having to constantly now making choices, which is defining more where they want to go. And what we've started to find as we've been doing this, Taya particularly has been paramount in this, is creating actually more of a community now of what that's looking like. And I feel like that keeps building
I know
more. It's us being more and more conscientious of just where do we want to support with our dollar, with our time, with our focus, with our attention. And so that's been playing in, I think, a lot more, even over these last couple of months, even more, where it's sort of like, okay, we really don't want to engage in this or this or this. So now let's actively really find where we can get access to the things that we need without having to. And as we've been doing that, we've kind of been building a bigger community around with it seems too. So yeah, I mean, big picture, what's going to happen?
We're reaching a climax right now. Is what it feels like.
I feel like this, I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to be like by, say, like June, July, see where we are at that point. All right. I think that we've covered a ton of stuff. And I mean, there's so much that we got into, and there's so much that could go so much deeper in if people want to. So, and for the most part, if they follow some of your work, where can we send people to learn more about the work you do, and so they can take a much deeper dive into some of that content as well?
Oh, well, my website's cosmicgaia.org, and I do subscription events. So with Cosmic Gaia subscription, you'll get about, 4 Zoom meetings at least a month, and, Q&As, and, doing personal readings, and then Dark to Light Patreon with David Rodriguez. And we, have a show together, and I put as much content out on YouTube and try and be safe so I don't lose that channel. And I got a lot of online events, and I'm going to keep my website updated because I have some big presentations, and new updated presentations that are coming up. And the first one is March 13th. You can go to cosmicgaia.org and kind of scroll down and see it. And if you are hearing this and lasted this long with kind of like, you talk a little bit too much, Laura, use the coupon code PTA25. You'll get 25% off. And constant replays, and you can take your time with the slides. That's what I like about it. And you can find that on my website. And so PTA lowercase 25% off and endless replays. And I'm doing all I can to just reveal things, even if I'm not comfortable with it. I am committed to, truth, and I'm in service to humanity. And I have nothing but the most ultimate and unconditional love for everyone. Even if I have to delete you and block you. And I know that sounds silly. It's like, oh, you're so great. You love everybody. Yeah. I experience feelings of hatred every once in a while. But anyway, that's beside the point. I love you guys. I'm so grateful that you had me on the show, and I would love to create more. And I know we talked about that, and I really appreciate everybody that, has tuned in tonight. I've had so much fun.
That was a blast, Laura. And we'll make sure we got all of those links, and we'll stick them in the show notes so that people know how to directly click to get to you. Thanks. Awesome. Well, Laura, that was wonderful. So we'll touch base soon. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Good night.
Bye. Well, that was awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to invest in your health and well-being. Since this podcast is brand new, reviews and subscribers are so vital for us to get off the ground and share this really important information. So if you found this information valuable, please post a review and subscribe to the podcast so you'll get our newest episodes. Also, if you know of someone who would benefit from this, please share it with them. You can also find us on Instagram at #InspireHealthPodcast. If you have a question that you'd like to be addressed, direct message me on Instagram or leave a comment on one of my posts. I would love to hear from you. And you can grab our show notes and free resources for each episode at inspirehealthpodcast.com. So be sure to go online and check it out.